everybody. Welcome back to the Year of the Animal. Welcome back to Crafting and Crime Daily. I'm your host, Rebecca, and we're going to do some true crime this week because there's no live trials for me to cover this week. There's one that started before the holidays that I'm not covering that one. I'm looking forward to this month. Will be the trial of Chad Daybell. Now, that we're going to cover. Um, that'll be a very interesting trial. So this week, you're going to get the story of the Belangolo Forest murders. But first, I'm going to tell you about my crafting, okay? You're the animal. Just something my friend and I come up with every year. We always have a theme. Last year was fantasy. The year before it was landscapes. The year before that it was Alice in Wonderland. This year it's animals. Mainly because we acquire all these pieces of art that we need to get to, and we put them in a group, and this group is animals. Lots of cat paintings. I'm working on the Crazy Cat Lady. It's a Hannah Lynn piece of art, and there's 29 cats in here. I've already done one cat. The other thing I'm doing is crafting a monkey hat. I'm crocheting a monkey hat. So my cat is running around here. Speaking of animals. So, like I said, no trials today. So I'm just crafting, and I'm going to cover this Belangolo Forest murders for you. So for this true crime story, we're going to go to Australia. But first, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button. Once you subscribe, make sure you hit all so you're notified when I have a new video. This is also available as a podcast on YouTube Music. So you can listen to it while you're on the go. Maybe you're returning gifts that you got over the holidays. I don't know. All right, let's talk about these murders. Today we're going to talk about the victims of these murders. There were 7 victims. The Belangolo Forest is situated, it's 35,000 acres, situated between Sydney and Melbourne. And the only way to get there is on this Hume Freeway. Now, back in the early 90s, when these murders occurred, it was known as the Hume Highway, and it was very popular amongst backpackers. Back in this day, back in the day, to me, 1990 feels like yesterday, folks. um, back in the day. So in Australia, this was a big part of this area. It was a big part of the economy, backpacking. It contributed billions of dollars to the economy for Australia. And these backpackers liked to hitchhike the Hume Highway between Melbourne and Sydney, back and forth. So in early or late 1989, 2 backpackers, James Gibson and Deborah Everest, his girlfriend, both 19 years old, they decided they're going to go backpacking. They were both waiting for the college um, semester to start, if you will. And they decided, "Oh, let's go do this." They both love the environment. They decided, let's go backpacking. She buys herself a green backpack, and he buys himself a red backpack and a brand new Ricoh camera. And they set out to go backpacking. The parents, James tells his parents, "We're going to do some hitchhiking." Deborah does not tell her mother she's going to be hitchhiking. I'm sure her mother would have not liked it. Um, I don't know why hitchhiking was such a thing then, because I can remember growing up knowing, and I grew up in the 80s, the 70s and the 80s, that you don't hitchhike. But anyway, they were hitchhiking. So, and it was very popular for these backpackers to do this. So their plans were to take the train to Melbourne, and their parents drop them off. They take the train to Melbourne, and then they hitchhike their way up to Sydney. Takes them like 6 hours. Their plan was to meet up with some friends, and by the time they get to Sydney, they knock on the door of the apartment where the friends live. Roommate answers and says, "No, they left without you," because they were all going to meet up and go to this thing called the Confest, which was where all these alternative lifestyle people met up. They were vegetarians and, whatever. They were going to meet up and have this little festival. So their plan was to meet up with the friends in Sydney and then travel to this festival. So the roommate says, hey, why don't you spend the night? It's getting late. They spend the night there. The next morning, December 30th at 9 a.m., they're going to set out to go to this confest. Now, both of them called their parents. We made it. We've arrived. We're safe. We're headed to the confest. However, they're never heard from again. Nobody knows what route they took to get there. Their bodies were actually found northwest of Sydney, which is not a direction they would have gone to get to this confest. And their bodies weren't found for 4 years. Both of these kids, 19-year-olds, were from Australia. The other victims of the Belangolo forest murders were all foreign backpackers. So these two were actually from Australia. They were very familiar with the layout of everything. And on March 13th, about 3 months, 2 months after their disappearance, this woman named Wendy, she's on her way to work, and she sees this red backpack on the side of the road. She picks up the backpack and goes to work. She looks in the backpack, nothing, can of sardines and whatever. There's nothing notable in this backpack. Later on, she looks at it again, and she looks at the bottom of the backpack, and there's all the name, address, phone number, everything. So she calls the phone number, and James's mother answers the phone, and she says, "Yes, that's my son's backpack. He's missing. He we haven't heard from him since December 30th. They've been looking for him. He didn't show up for his sister's wedding on January 21st. Um, they had reported, both parents had reported their kids missing, and despite their best efforts, they, for months did not find these kids. And then a cyclist, hearing reports about this backpack being found and these missing backpackers, he realizes that, on January 1st, 2 days after they had gone missing, he was cycling and he had found this Ricoh camera. There was brand new, no identification on it, so he just takes it home. But now he realizes, hey, this could be related to that, and he turns it into the police. And sure enough, that was James's Ricoh camera. And those two items were part of what led them to the northwest of Sydney because that's where they were found. And they search that area and search that area. They don't find anything. The next victim is 21-year-old Simone Schmidle. She was from Germany. People called her Simmy. She was last seen hiking on January 20th of 1991 in Liverpool, which is west of Sydney. She had, grown up in Germany. After high school, she traveled. She had traveled to Yugoslavia, and she had remarked that she loved it so much she wanted to travel the world. So after that, she saved up some money. She traveled over to Canada. She went to Alaska, and when she was over there, she made some friends, and they all said, "Hey, you should go to Australia. It's great." So she's thinking, "Hey, this sounds like a friendly place to go." Her next destination was Australia. So she goes back home, she saves up some more money, and then she heads to Australia. She worked as a bookkeeper, so she could get the money to do this. And meanwhile, she buys a blue backpack and she heads out to Australia. She flies to Sydney. On the plane, she meets another backpacker, and they become fast friends. When the flight lands, the backpacker says, "Hey, I got this friend. We can go stay there." She heads to the friend's name is Christine Murphy. So she makes friends with Christine Murphy, and they use Christine Murphy's house as kind of a home base. They would go sightseeing, and then they would come back eventually to Christine Murphy's house. So at one point, they're at Christine Murphy's house, and Simone says, Simi, she says, "Hey, I'm gonna go by myself. I'm gonna backpack. I'm gonna hitchhike over to Melbourne. I'm going by myself because my mom's coming in to visit. She's coming from Germany. we're going to have a visit, so I'm just going to go by myself. And they're like, no, 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 it's dangerous to hitchhike by yourself. You shouldn't go by yourself. She's like, no, I'm going to be fine. I'll be fine. Well, she sets out on her trail to hitchhike to Melbourne, and she is never seen again. Her mother arrives. There's no Simi to greet her. Um, so she contacts Christine Murphy. Christine says she set out for Sydney. Nobody's heard from her. And so the mother stayed there for another 6 weeks trying to find her daughter. And after 6 weeks, there was just no signs of her. So she returns home. The next couple is Gabor. I hope, forgive me for not knowing how to pronounce these names. Another German couple, Gabor Neugebauer and Anya Habschied. Now, Gabor was 21 years old and Anya was 20. Uh, Gabor was really passionate about nature. He apparently in Germany, there's a mandatory military service you have to do. So he spent 15 months in the military, and afterwards he decided he would enroll in in at the university. And he wanted to study geology, but he couldn't get into that program, so he enrolled in a philosophy program instead. But he tells his father while he's waiting for this semester to start, um, I'm going to go do some traveling. But when I get back, I promise I'll enroll in something that, is a little bit more lucrative, something that won't disappoint my parents, apparently. So he meets this girl, Anya, and she shared his love of the environment. And he was really tall, she was kind of short, and so she felt very safe with him. And they became boyfriend and girlfriend. And they decided, hey, we're going to travel together. And they were both very, clean cut, if you will, no smoking, no drinking. They just enjoyed each other's company. Um, they spent all of 1991 touring Europe. When they got back from Europe, they decided, hey, we really like this. We're going to save some money and we're going to go to Asia. They wanted to fly to Indonesia and tour Asia. I need some coffee. Hold on. So they were going to spend 2 months in Asia, but on their way to Asia, there's a horrible weather in Asia. So they have this last minute change of plans. Okay, we're going to go to Australia. So they go to Australia instead. And they're staying in this hostel in King's Crossing, which I believe is in Sydney. Yeah, late 1991. During this time of year, it's summer in Australia. For us, it's winter in the US, but it's summer in Australia. So he spends the night in this hotel. He couldn't sleep. It's hot, it's sticky. He gets up, he calls his mom, and he's like, I hate it here. As soon as we can, we're leaving. We've already booked a flight to Indonesia that leaves on January 1st. So he told his mom they had planned to leave the next morning, um, which would be this was Christmas Day. He's calling home. So the next morning, December 26th, Boxing Day, he and Anya were planning to leave to Darwin. Darwin was like their final destination. So they were going to stop in a few places along the way to explore and sightsee, but Darwin was their final destination. And they had set up a post office box in Darwin where people could, it was very popular for the backpackers and the hitchhikers to do this. They would set up post office boxes so people could send stuff there. And his mother, Gabor's mother, had sent like a package to them, a Christmas package with cookies and everything. They never picked it up. So they were never heard from after December 26th. They set off that morning. The parents started noticing, hey, they haven't called. Uh, they also noticed that there were $3,000 in traveler's checks that had never been cashed. So they were very, very concerned. They reported them missing. They were never seen again. All right. The next couple is Joanne Walters and Caroline Clark. Now, Joanne had recently traveled around Europe, and she just loved it. So she sees this advertisement in the paper after she gets back. She sees an advertisement in the paper, and it's saying two people can travel for the price of one ticket to Australia. So she calls her friend Pauline and she says, "Hey, you want to go to Australia with me?" And Pauline's like, "Yeah, I'm in. Let's go." So the two of them travel to Australia. When they get there, they go their separate ways. I mean, they travel for a little while, do some sightseeing, and then eventually they go their separate ways. Joanne decides she's going to get an apartment in Sydney to raise some money because it's expensive, this backpacker lifestyle. So she goes to Sydney. She rents an apartment with another backpacker, and she gets a job as a nanny. She works there for a few months. She meets Caroline Clark. Now, Joanne Walters was 22. Caroline Clark was 21 years old. Caroline, she's also from, both of these girls were from Great Britain. She wanted to be a police officer, but when she went to apply for the job, they said, you make a great candidate, but you need a little bit more life experience. So she decided, okay, I'm going to travel. So this is how she ends up in Australia. So Joanne and she meet up, and they're great. They hit it off. They decide we're going to do some traveling together. They're both, they both have jobs. Caroline's working in a pizzeria to raise money, and they're both in Sydney. And Joanna's working as this nanny, and they meet up with some other backpackers who were also traveling, and they were told, you can travel and make money at the same time as fruit pickers. It's a job nobody wants because it's a temporary job. Once you're done, you're done. Then you have to move on to something else. It's a very transient kind of job, and so very popular amongst these backpackers. So Joanne resigns her position as a nanny, and they understood, but she kept in touch with them. She would uh, return for holidays and call them every now and then. They grew close. She grew close to that family. In February of 1992, they set out to go to this one area of Australia and pick grapes. Once grape season was over, they found they everybody was heading to Tasmania to pick apples. So they said, okay, we're going to go to Tasmania. So they go to Tasmania, they start picking apples. And then once apple season is over, they said, okay, we're going to go to um, Western Australia for melon season. So on April 16th of 1992, they call home. Joanne calls home and she says, this is what our plans are. We're going for melon season. However, they didn't leave the next day, the 17th. That was their plan to leave the next day. They didn't. They were, running behind. They don't leave until the 18th, April 18th. They leave to go on this melon picking adventure, and they are never seen again. Then in September of 1992, there are 8 members of this Orienteers training expedition that are going into the Belangolo State Forest. Now, I do not know what an orienteer is. Alexa, what is an orienteer?
Good afternoon, Rebecca. The Orient is a term for the East in relation to Europe, traditionally comprising anything belonging to the Eastern world. It is the antonym of the term Occident, which refers to the Western world.
I don't think that's the right thing. Is orienteering a sport? Alexa, is orienteering a sport?
According to an Alexa Answers contributor, orienting means align or position something relative to the points on a compass or map. Orienteering is a competitive sport in which participants find their way to various checkpoints across rough country with the aid of a map and compass, the winner being the one with the lowest elapsed time. Did that answer your question?
Yes. Who knew?
Thanks for your feedback.
That sounds like fun. Oh my goodness. So 8 people set out in the Belangolo State Forest to do this. So apparently they break up into teams of 2. But now this makes sense because I had no idea what this was. Okay, it makes sense now. They set off in teams of two to on this orienteer training expedition, and one of the pairs goes to the area of Belangolo State Forest called Executioner's Drop, and they notice this overwhelming stench, and they think it's like, it could have been anything in this forest. This forest has everything: kangaroos, wombats, koala bears, everything. So they're thinking, oh, it must be a dead wombat. And as they get closer, they can see some fur, and they're like, yeah, it's a dead wombat. Then they get up to where this is, and they realize it is a body. So they mark where they're at. They go back. They bring authorities out. Authorities come out. They set up a full search. The spotlights and all that stuff. But they realize it's dark. We can't search this area or do anything until the next morning. So the next morning, daylight comes, they start searching, and about 30 meters from this body, they find another. Yep, and that's where we're going to leave off for today. I will see you tomorrow where I talk about the continuation of the Belangolo State Forest murders. Have a great Tuesday, everybody. Don't forget, hit that thumbs up button on your way out today, and I will see you tomorrow in Crafting and Crime Daily. Have a great day, everybody. Bye bye.